Hello, and welcome to this lesson on integrating quotes with ties. Today I'm going to teach you the 4 ways to use quotes correctly in your writing. It is a great idea to quote other people for 3 reasons. First of all, you want to quote other people when you're analyzing literature. You want to use specific textual references because the more specific you can be, the better. It doesn't matter if you are writing for the English 2 North Carolina EOC, or whether you're doing an analysis paper on literature for a college class. The more specific you can be with those textual references, the better. You also want to establish credibility with quotes, so you only want to quote people with authority. Like you might want to quote a Dr. So-and-so who is an authority on your topic, or the corporate leader of such and such corporation, or you might want to, if you're writing about freedom, you might want to quote somebody who has led a revolution, but you don't necessarily want to quote Webster's dictionary for what independence means, especially when you can just paraphrase it yourself. The other reason that you may want to quote somebody is if the words are said so eloquently that you could not imagine adding more emotion to your argument any other way. You do not want to quote other people when you can just simply paraphrase it yourself and give credit to it, to your source. So you definitely want to give credit to the source if you paraphrase it, but when you can put it in your own words, you should do so. Okay, so ways that students do this wrong. When you are quoting, never just stick the author's name at the end of the quote and let the entire sentence be just the quote with the author's name. We're going to use this quote the entire lesson. I get by with a little help from my friends by the Beatles. That is not how you integrate a quote. All you've done is put a quote and then you've listed somebody's name. You haven't even really written an entire sentence with who said the quote. It makes you look elementary. You also want to never just have the entire sentence as the quote and not ever recognize at all who said it within the sentence. Even if you happen to put a citation that gives credit at the end, and if you haven't learned how to do this, just hang on. We're going to be learning it soon. Even this is not acceptable because the sentence needs to be, at least in part, your words. Not okay. So let's talk about the 4 ways that are okay. We're going to use an acronym called TIES to help us remember the 4 ways. T stands for tag, I stands for introduce, E stands for embed, and S stands for split. And conveniently, these are ways that you're going to tie the quote into your writing. See what I did there? Okay, so the first way for tag. Think about if you wanted to put the words, I get by with a little help from my friends, into your writing, how are you going to tag it? Well, it is said by John Lennon and the other members of the Beatles, Ringo Starr and George Harrison and Paul McCartney. They all wrote this song together. That's why the citation that you see down there says Lennon, John, ETAL, which is Latin for and more. Okay, so anyway, if you are playing a game of chase and you tag somebody, most likely you're going to tag that person as they run away from you. So that's exactly what you do with a dialogue tag if you're going to tag a quote. First of all, you're going to exchange your period for a comma inside your quotation mark, and then put your so-and-so said. I get by with a little help from my friends, comma, John Lennon and Paul McCartney once said. Now I'm just using their 2 names here because they actually get credited for the lyrics and the other guys get credited for the music. Alright, so tag is where the so-and-so said comes at the end. I stands for introduce. So this is not rocket science. I get by with a little help from my friends. Where would your so-and-so come, your so-and-so said come? It would obviously introduce or come at the beginning, according to John Lennon and Paul McCartney, comma, I get by with a little help from my friends. Notice that our comma goes right after our tag this time. So there's another way to introduce that doesn't require your comma. You could say, John Lennon said that I get by with a little help from my friends. And that actually incorporates the quote into your sentence. You don't need the comma anymore. In fact, what you have done is just embedded it, which is what the E stands for. So how would we embed I get by with a little help from my friends into the sentence? I want you to think of your sentence as a delicious chocolate chip cookie. The chocolate chips are the pieces of the quote that become embedded or cushioned all within your sentence. So E stands for embed. The parts that we have embedded, our chocolate chips, if you will, are in red. My mama and the Beatles always said, a little help from my friends, notice that's a part of our quote, will help me to, here's our second chocolate chip or part of our quote, get by. And this time I put a citation at the end because I didn't actually use the author's last name. A citation requires in MLA format that you put the first words of the citation at the end of your sentence so that if you looked on your citation list, you would be able to find Lennon, comma, John, blah, 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 with the rest of it in alphabetical order. So my mama always, and the Beatles always said, blah, 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 has Lennon, comma, E-T-A-L at the end of it so that my reader would know exactly who my author was in the event that I didn't necessarily want to say my author's name in the sentence. All right, we can also embed in this way. We can just have a citation and not mention the Beatles at all. And there are two things that I want you to get from this example. The way that I wrote it says, the conventional wisdom that we can, quote, get by with a little help from our friends is a timeless treasure. Notice that I have started the sentence with my own words and ended the sentence with my own words. And there's just a snippet inside the middle of my sentence that is actually my quote. But my sentence wouldn't have made sense if I said, get by with a little help from my friends, because I said we, the conventional wisdom that we can, blah, blah, blah. The my and the we would not make sense. I had to make the our plural. So what I do is change a little bit of the quote, and to let my reader know that I do so, I put it in these brackets. I also want you to notice one final thing is that the period when I have a citation comes at the very end of my sentence after the citation and not before. Okay, one final way. The S in ties stands for split. You can imagine if you have a banana split, then that means that you've put ice cream in the middle. Sorry for all my food references today. I hope I'm not making you too hungry. So what we're going to do is put our so-and-so said smack dab in the middle. I get by, Lennon and McCartney mused, with a little help from my friends. Notice I have two commas this time. My first comma snuggles to the last word of my sentence inside my quotation marks, and my second comma comes after my so-and-so said. So these are the four ways that you can use ties to correctly integrate quotes into your sentences. You can tag, where you put it at the end. You can introduce, where you put it at the beginning. You can embed, where you put little chunks of your quote throughout your sentence, like a chocolate chip cookie, or you can split it, where you put your so-and-so said in the middle. As long as you're using these four ways, and especially if you use a variety of them, your writing will look, oh, so much more intelligent.